Good morning, students. And apart from fermentation chapter in paper 8, I do handle second chapter few topics like blotting techniques. You do not have in detail like the troubleshooting, what are the buffers, etc. But what is the principle of these blotting techniques and application? And molecular techniques like PCR, its various types and its application. You also have hybridization technique types and application. In hybridization technique, specifically fluorescent in situ hybridization and microarray. Since blotting also involves hybridization as one of the important step, I am planning to start with what is hybridization and then followed by fish, and then we will touch about the principle and application of southern, northern and western blotting, and then we'll go to microarray. And in another lecture, we will see about what is PCR, the basic principle and its application. So, hybridization, nucleic acid hybridization. You all know that nucleic acids are DNA, RNA. Basically, DNA is the highlight, right? It is the genomic material. It controls various kinds of aspects in the cell. Of course, RNA is also genome for certain viruses, but majority of the living organisms contain DNA as the genetic material. So we are more interested in the regions of the DNA which control many things. With the regions are the DNA which are either linked and controlling the phenotypes. So many times we try to like have a sequence and try to find out where is the sequence. So since DNA is double stranded, it cannot be directly used, like there are techniques which can bind to a specific minor groove and major groove, because the whole sequence is different. You can have techniques where you can have sequence based, the motif based binding and identifying the regions, but majority of the techniques I used to identify the sequence of the DNA is hybridization, nucleic acid hybridization. So it is basically a technique in molecular biology in which single stranded nucleic acid are allowed to interact so that the complex called the hybrids are formed by the molecules with similar complementary sequences. So when we say single stranded, we need to denature this double stranded DNA. So the actually the binding of the double stranded DNA is because of the hydrogen bonding all over the DNA molecule because of the base interaction, right? A and T binds and G and C have hydrogen bonding. So this hydrogen bonding can be broken and remade. How? Denaturation, when you provide heat, there is breaking of this hydrogen bonds and the two strands are separated. When you bring back the normal condition, slowly reduce the temperature, they come back. That is what we call annealing. And they come back to the same structure because the base sequences attracts the other base sequences, and they form the molecule again. So that is the wonderful property of the DNA which is utilized. And in between this process, if you put your probe of interest which contains the sequence which is complementary for what you are searching. See, in the first in this slide, the first is the normal DNA. When you heat it, it will denature and it will separate. In this step, if you add the probe which contains exactly the complementary sequence to the strand what you are looking for from the 5 prime end, then there is binding. So this probe, wonderfully utilized this probe, and then a lot of techniques have been developed. This probe can be a DNA probe, this probe can be a RNA probe. RNA probes are easy to generate. Suppose you have a plasmid which contains your gene of interest, what you are looking on the chromosome. That nowadays the expression plasmid comes with the T7 RNA polymerase site, where you can generate the RNA probes in vitro, and you can label it and then hybridize. The binding of this probe and the template DNA is called hybridization, and that binding will lead a hybrid molecule, DNA RNA hybrid, that can be visualized by various methods. The principle of hybridization is the addition of probe to a complex mixture of target DNA. The mixture is incubated under conditions that promote the formation of hydrogen bond between the strands. Okay, so uh, this hybridization can happen DNA RNA hybrid, or DNA DNA hybrid, or RNA RNA hybrid. In situ hybridization and fish analysis are few examples apart from blotting. Uh, there are factors which affect this hybridization, like what is the strand length. You can't take 1 kb of DNA and then expect the 100% binding. There should be particular strand length by which you can have the template and the probe binding. The base composition and the chemical environment are very important, the factors for hybridization of these probes. So basically, a probe is a nucleic acid fragment that is complementary to another nucleic acid sequence, and thus when labeled, labeling, I'll tell you what is labeling in the next slide, can be used to identify a complementary segment. So a probe actually hybridizes to single-stranded nucleic acid. It can be DNA or RNA molecule because of complementarity between the probe and the target. These probes can be synthesized in laboratory as single or double-stranded probe, but a working nucleic acid should always be a single-stranded, then only it can bind to the complementary sequence. So you can have, as I mentioned here, you can have DNA probes, you can have RNA probe, and you can have oligonucleotides, synthetic oligonucleotides as probe. DNA probes, it is a short sequence of DNA labeled isotopically or chemically that is used for the detection of complementary nucleotide sequence. Similarly, RNA probe is a short sequence of RNA labeled isotopically or chemically that is used for detection of a complementary nucleotide sequence, they are also known as ribo probes or complementary probes, and often used in situ hybridization because of high sensitivity. Coming up to oligonucleotide probes, it is also a short sequence of nucleotides synthesized to match a region where a mutation is known to occur, and then they are used as molecular probe to detect. So what are the different labeling? You can have a radioactive labeling, you can have a non-radioactive labeling. Now I have mentioned here radioactive labeling. Suppose P32. An ATP molecule can contain a terminal P32 or an alpha P32 radioactive isotope, and that can be used by methods of labeling, and then this labeling can be incorporated, or S35 can be used instead of P32 and incorporated. Tritium H3 can be used. Non-radioactive labeling, here I have given only 3 examples, but you have many non-radioactive molecules like haptin, biotin, deoxygenane, and fluorescent dyes, as in case of fluorescence in situ hybridization, can be used for labeling. So labeling of the probe, it can be done by two methods: in vivo labeling and in vitro labeling. In vivo labeling by supplying labeled nucleotide to the cultured cells. In vitro labeling is like an enzyme is used to incorporate the labeled nucleotide in the probe. So I'll mention again, hybridization of the probe can be done by two methods: in vivo labeling and in vitro labeling. In vitro labeling is very easy. You have the plasmid DNA, you have the enzymes, you just have to give this labeled probes, and in the test tube, in the Eppendorf vial or in the PCR vial, the labeling happens. In vivo labeling is like you supply tritium based like raw materials in the culture medium of the HeLa cells or any cells what you are growing, where the cells itself they develop this copy. That copy is already tritium labeled. That is by supplying labeled nucleotides to the cultured cells. Okay, that is about hybridizations and pores. And I have mentioned fluorescent dyes. Fluorescent dyes like CY5. I'll write here. CY5 is extensively used, or else there are many other fluorescent dyes, like for example 6 sorry 6 carboxy fluorescein can be used. 6 carboxyfluorescein can be used for what the technique is called as fish. Now we'll see what is fish. Fluorescent in situ hybridization is a technique that uses basically fluorescent probe. That doesn't mean that it cannot use the non-fluorescent, but majority of the usage is by fluorescent probes, which bind to special sites on the chromosomes with a high degree of sequence complementarity to the probes. The fluorescent probes are nucleic acid labeled with fluorescent groups and can bind to specific DNA or RNA sequences. Thus, we can understand when and where a specific DNA sequence exists in cells by detecting the fluorescent group. So it was developed in early 1980s when people started labeling cells and then chromosomes. Flow cytometry, as you would have heard, is a technique by which the cells can be labeled with fluorescent dyes and can be separated. During that time this technique was developed. Basically, as I mentioned in the previous dye, the fish uses fluorescent dyes like sci-fi and 6 amino 6 carboxyfluorescein, it is also called as FAM. They are used for labeling. For example, here I have mentioned a like basic flow. So you have to generate the probes. The probes can be generated by different methods like Nick translation, random primed labeling, and PCR. Two labeling strategy can be used. One is using non-radioactive, another one is using fluorescence based tagging. When you Nick translate, that region of the DNA can be labeled with using say for example fluorescein, that is the sci-fi based, and then you can also add haptin based. Here in this picture what we have showed here is an haptin based labeling. In B, the first one where probe is written is a haptin, and the other one is the fluorescent dye. You can fix the tissue, and then on the fixed tissue you can make the chromosomes. There are procedures to make the chromosome uh, like um, like how to fix it. You take the sample cells and then pellet it out, and then fix the cells. the fixation, after fixation, formalin, if using formalin you fix the cells, and after fixation you wash the cells, and then you put this hybrid the probes which you require, denature the probe, make them single standard, and the probes what you want to bind, you can mix it with the samples, and then you can visualize using epifluorescent microscopy. Okay, so when you have this fluorescent dyes, it's easy one step process where using excitation and emission filters, using fluorescent microscopy directly you can visualize. But when you use something called haptins, you have one more step where you have to have an antibody, or you have to have some molecule which can go and bind to this haptin, and then that will develop a color reaction or intensified image of the place where this probe is bound. So there is an advantage in using this haptic or deoxygenane based screening, because when you are amplifying a signal, it will be a very sharp signal, and that is very clearly you can observe. In case of fluorescent, it is like you have to have a clean slide with no background noise, and then you have to observe it. Observation, if you see, it will be something like this, where you can see this blue color, sorry, where you have this blue color which is developed by the haptin base, and you can observe that there is uh, red color in this short, there is a red color in this short arms of the chromosomes. So there is what the dye is bound, where sorry, our probe is bound. And here also, this is one more imaging where you can observe, here there is a probe bound, here there is a probe bound. So in the similar way, this is how the imaging looks like when you develop with fish. So now one more we will see. This was about fish. It is extensively used in various diagnostic purposes, like it is used in pathology, like you want to do a pathogen profiling or abnormal gene expression, fish is used. It is used in microbiology. Classically it is used for 16s rRNA to find the morphology and population of structure of microorganisms. In developmental biology, like for observing gene expression profiling in embryonic tissue, for karyotyping and phylogenetic analysis, to observe fish patterns on individual chromosome, or chromosomal aberrations can be found out. Fish can also be used for physical mapping, like mapping clones on chromosomes, and direct assessment of mapped clones to chromosomal regions associated with heterochromatin or euchromatin. I'll again mention, since I have not put in the slides, I'll again mentions the application of fish. Fish can be used in microbiology, fish can be used in pathology. Just mentioning is not enough. You at least you have to write two sentences, like fish is used in pathology for pathogen profiling or abnormal gene expression. Fish is used in developmental biology to understand gene expression profiling in embryonic tissue. Fish is also used in karyotyping and phylogenetic analysis, like finding out unique fish patterns on individual chromosomes. Fish also is used for chromosomal aberration. Fish is also used for physical mapping, like mapping clones on chromosomes and direct assignment of mapped clones to chromosomal regions associated with heterochromatin and euchromatin. Okay, this is about the technique of fish. Now we will see other hybridization techniques where uh, I mean, hybridization is extensively used. Okay, that is called as the blotting techniques, right? I think you have been like exposed from many classes that there is something called as blotting techniques, which was developed way before this fish was developed. So blotting technique involves development of blots are like used for transferring DNA, RNA and protein onto a carrier, so they can be separated, and often follow the use of gel electrophoresis. The southern blot is used for transferring DNA, northern blot is used for transferring RNA, and western blot is used for transferring the proteins. So we'll start with Western blot. What is Western blot? Western blot is an analytical technique used in molecular biology, immunogenetics, and other molecular biology to detect specific protein in a sample of tissue homogenate or extract. Western blotting is called so as the procedure is similar to southern blotting, while southern blotting is used to detect RNA and western blotting is used to detect protein. Western blotting is also called protein immuno blotting because an antibody is used to specifically detect its antigen. So the technique consists of three steps: separation of protein by size, transfer to a solid support, and then making the target protein using marking the target protein using proper primary and secondary antibody, that is the visualization. So electrophoresis is a method by which you can separate the protein based on the charge and size of the protein molecule and the structure of the protein molecules. Okay, we'll see the flow then. Okay, so here uh, the cells or any kind of tissue, need not be only this can be bacterial cells, this can be plant cells, are taken and they have made lysate in a proper lysis medium, and they are separated by SDS electrophoresis. Because charge is uniform in SDS, and then polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis based on the pore size, you can separate the cell lysate into different kinds of bands. And this is the gel transfer, this is the separation mechanism. The proteins are coated with sodium dotacyl sulfate, and then they become uniform charge, and the basis of separation is only uh, because of the uh, size what they have. So once they are separated, they are blotted. That means these gels, without staining, they are put into some specific assembly called as the tanks, and then you can transfer the blot onto the membrane. So what kind of membrane is used here? The membrane used here can be nylon membrane, the membrane used here can be nitrocellulose membrane, the membrane used here can be polyvinylidene fluoride membrane, popularly called as PVDF membrane. Okay, so onto the membrane, and this transfer can be of a different type. Southern blotting is by capillary action, it just happens very fast, but in case of protein blotting, you need to have a semi-dry transfer or complete wet transfer. What is meant by semi-dry transfer? You need to have assembly, like here what is shown. You can see there is a graphite electrode above, and sorry, there is a graphite electrode in this picture, and then using the electricity they are transferring the proteins from the gel to the membrane. So how do they transfer? When the movement happens, the proteins are negatively charged, so you have the positive electrode above and you have the negative electrode below. On the negative electrode below, you put the like wet tissues, and then on top of the wet tissue you put the gel. On top of the gel, without the air bubbles, you put the membrane, and then on this membrane on top of the membrane you put the tissue paper followed by the electrode. When the movement of the current happens, the protein from the gel moves from the gel to the membrane, and once they are transferred onto the membrane, they are ready for something called as detection. So in detection there are steps. Like the first step is you have all the proteins which are transferred from the gel to the membrane over the time, and once they are transferred, you there is a region in between the protein running samples where there is no protein. So if you add another protein like antibody to detect the required protein target, this antibody can go and bind to non-specific regions also. So first you have to block the non-specific regions. How do you do? By adding blocking agents, which is nothing but albumin, which will go and bind to this non-specific regions and do not allow the antibody to bind to this non-specific region. So they bind only to the specific protein of interest. Once they are like blocked, then antibody is added, primary antibody is added, so that they can be recognizing the protein of interest. Here you can see there are many other there are many other proteins which are not recognized by the antibody. Only the protein of interest is recognized by the antibody. Once the primary antibody is added, you can add secondary antibody, and this secondary antibody you can use diversity of antibody. If you have a range of different protein recognizing primary antibody, you can have a secondary antibody which recognizes the Fc region of any of the primary antibody. Then you can label the secondary antibody in terms of a you can have an enzyme attached here, or you can have a chemiluminescent probe attached here, or you can have a radioactive probe attached to the secondary antibody. So once they are attached, so this is how the assembly looks like. You have a primary antibody, you have secondary antibody, you can add a chromogenic substance which can develop colorimetrically and cause a enzyme reaction, and you can observe your band of interest. So band of interest finally appears like this. Yeah, if if the antibody is very specific, you do not have any other contaminants in the whole protein transfer, you can have one single band which of interest appearing. So that was about the western blot. And the now we will see what is called as northern blot. Sorry. This is the way it has to be assembled. This is for northern blot, but I have just mentioned here to show the assembly way. So here again, this is the western blot. Applications. What are the application? First, you can estimate the size of the protein of the if you have isolated some unknown protein and then you have developed an antibody against it, you can estimate the accurate size of the protein, and then it can be used as a confirmatory test for diagnosis of HIV example, or any other pathogenic molecule, or it can be used for demonstration of specific antibody in the serum for diagnosis of certain pathogens. Need not be pathogen. It can be a simple experiment, like you have cloned a protein in a vector and that contains his tag. If you want to confirm that your protein of interest is your clone, then you can have his tag specific antibody that will go and bind to the specific clone, and then give out a bright band once you develop, and that is like a confirmatory test that your protein is cloned and of a particular molecular weight. You have wide application for western blotting. Coming to southern blotting, this was the first which was developed, right? Professor Sir Edwin Southern was a professor of biochemistry and a fellow of Trinity who developed this method in 1975. He won many prize for this development finding, and the technique is now called as southern blotting. The one method again involves the electrophoresis, separation, transfer, and hybridization. Okay, so we'll briefly go through it. Southern blotting combines not polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis, it combines agarose gel electrophoresis for size separation of DNA with methods to transfer the size separated DNA to a filter membrane, okay, for probe hybridization. And this is a key method of hybridization. You know, that process of forming a double stranded DNA molecule between single stranded DNA probe and single stranded DNA target molecule. So as I told, the principle is separating the molecules. The for example, genomic DNA is taken. Genomic DNA will be very big, and then you can what break down the genomic molecule using restriction endonucleases, and these molecules are run on electrophoresis agarose gel, and then they are immobilized on a matrix of agarose gel, and then they are run on agarose gel, and blot is done. Blotting again, the assembly is same as I showed in electrophoresis. First you have a tank here, sorry. First you have a tank which contains the buffer of transfer, then you have a solid support, and then you have the agarose gel, and on top of that membrane, off top of that the Whatman filter paper, gel towels, and then a glass plate or weight which can bring about capillary action, and there is transfer onto the membrane. Nylon membranes are better for this transfer because they easily take up nucleic acids, either DNA or RNA, and then at one step UV exposure for a very short time, there is fixation of the transferred DNA or RNA. But when if you use nitrocellulose membrane, then you have to have an additional step of baking, and then only that will be ready for developing a blot. So now what we have done is we have taken genomic DNA, restriction digested, and then formed short fragments, and they are electrophorized, and then we are transferred into blot. After transferring onto blot, your probes are added. Probes are can be P32 labeled, or it can be P32 is the best because you can just add the probe, like, and then remove any unbound probes, and then you can expose that to the uh, X-ray film, and then you have wherever this probe is binding, the hybridization has happened. After removing the excess probe away, can be detected by using auto radiography, which reveals the DNA fragment to which the hybridized probe is bound. So restriction, I have already mentioned this. Restriction endonucleases, they cut the genomic DNA, and fragments are run by electrophoresis and transferred onto blotting paper, where they are incubated with probes. Probes used in Southern blotting are with high selectivity, and this selectivity can bind with the resolution of one DNA strand in millions of other strands, and it is characteristics to bind to indeed fragments. And I have not mentioned here, but there are very beautiful methods which are developed right now. Like for example, if you have few samples of the say plasma, sorry, not plasma, you have the serum of the patient, and you want to find out whether there is a probe, I mean a viral infection, then you can have a fluorescent probe. You need not do this hybrid transfer and all. In the append of vial only, you can mix this probe, and then you can get a fluorescent kind of a glow in one of the vial where there is a positive. So advanced techniques of this hybridization, DNA hybridization, has also been developed. So there are various application of Southern blotting. The primary usage of Southern blotting is to identify a specific DNA in a DNA sample. It is mostly used in identification of viral infection and certain bacterial infection. It is useful in the study of mutation and gene arrangement. This property is used to diagnose neonatal diseases and genetic diseases. It's also used in phylogenetic studies like paternity and maternity analysis, forensic studies, and personal identification. The structure of the genes or to elucidate restriction enzyme maps, or it can be used for methylated site production also in some cases. There are techniques like RFLP, restricted fragment length polymorphism, can be easily understood by easily done by Southern blotting. So the next blotting technique is northern blotting. The steps are very similar, but here the starting material is different. That is what we called as the RNA is used in northern blotting. So northern blotting is a technique for detection of specific RNA sequences. It was developed in 1979 by a person called as James Alvin and George Strack at the Stanford University. As an analogy to southern blotting, they named it as northern blotting. Similar steps is there. Here RNA is isolated from several biological samples. Those samples can be different tissue samples, or the same tissue sample at different developmental stages. RNA is more susceptible to degradation than DNA. You have to be very careful, and the RNA extracted is loaded onto the gel. Here you have diversity of RNA. You have mRNA, you have ribosomal RNA, you have tRNA. Now you have microRNAs with a short RNA. So if you are using an mRNA, then it is easy to use agarose gel. But you want to detect a microRNA, then you have to use polyacrylamide gels and then run the gel. And after running the gel also, since it is very sensitive to degradation, you cannot run a simple agarose gel. If you have to run a simple agarose gel, the environment around the in the lab should be very clean of RNases. RNases are endonucleases which can break down this RNA molecule. So what people do is they run it on formaldehyde MOPS gel, which in any condition you can run this MOPS gel, and then separate out the bands of interest. Once the bands of interest are separated, they are developed by a blot. Here nitrocellulose membrane will be used, and then a blot will be developed. That means the same assembly. You have a tank of buffer. Onto the solid platform you will keep the Whatman filter paper, on top of which Whatman filter paper you will keep the the agarose gel, and after agarose gel you will put on top of it put the membrane, and then on top of the membrane you have the another stack of Whatman filter paper, and on top of that paper towels, and then you put the weight. Because of the capillary action, the fragments of RNA from the agarose gel will be transferred onto the membrane, and then you can fix that using UV, and then you can develop the like blot. Here the membrane can be nitrocellulose membrane or nylon membrane. So the sandwich helps in transfer. The membrane is then kept in a dish containing hybridization buffer. Then it is hybridized with probe, and once the is washed, and the label probes can be detected using X-ray film if it is labeled with what sorry P32 labeling. Here this is an example. Here again one more thing you can observe here, like in DNA you don't get a single, usually people develop two bands at a time, an rRNA and your specific mRNA. So that is a double conformation. Usually two probes are added into one developing blot. So again their probes are very specifically designed probes, so that they can bind to very one in million sequence. So the difference between northern blotting and southern blotting is the southern blotting is separation of DNA, where northern blotting is separation of RNA. Southern blotting requires denaturation, because the separation is I did not mention one step. When you separate the gel electrophoresis of genomic DNA digested with restriction enzymes, then they are incubated with mineral acid, with a low concentration of mineral acids, so that their separation of the DNA happens into single strand. Then they are transferred onto blot. That is what is here mentioned. Denaturation is required, but for northern blotting denaturation is not required. Membrane, what is used here in southern blotting is nitrocellulose membrane or nylon membrane. In northern blotting, the affinity of you can transfer onto nylon or nitrocellulose membrane, but the affinity is not so good. So what we use for RNA, most of the times it does not bind to nitrocellulose membrane effectively. So what we use is amino benzoylated membrane, that is called as diazobenzyl oxymethyl membranes. So hybridization in case of southern blotting is DNA hybridization. In case of northern blotting it is RNA DNA hybridization. So coming to applications, you have again wide. It is used for study of RNA degradation, RNA splicing, RNA half-life, detect a particular type of mRNA, and others to confirm or check transgenic knockout mice animals, what kind of expression of mRNA is happening. So basically it is for analysis of regulated genes and checking if the cloned cDNA is of the required length. So this is the differences between all the three kinds of blotting techniques what we studied. The first we studied is western blot, northern blot and southern blot. This is a comparison of all the three. Okay, you can go through this. And now coming to an interesting technique called microarray. So I will first mention a brief flow of what is microarray, and then we will go to the application part. So for example, when we are doing an study, say first we take a normal cell. I'll take a pen, and then we'll take a color for it. Let me take red. Okay, then so if you have a normal cell, and if you have a cell where you are induced something, suppose a cell is there where it is challenged with some condition, like a high amount of stress, that is, you have removed a nutrient. Now the cells is trying to grow in the available nutrient. Suppose you want to see the difference between two, the beautiful, like what are the genes which are highly expressed, what are the genes which are lowly expressed in these two different cell population. Let me name this one and let me name this two. You can use the technique of microarray, and then you can see what are the different genes. Okay, so I'll just mention it. So in this step, in this technique also, you have to isolate RNA from both the samples separately. RNA has to be isolated. Once the RNAs are isolated, sorry, they are labeled with different sorry, they are labeled with different probes. For example, the RNA from the first sample is labeled with sci-fi, and RNA from the second sample is labeled with some red fluorescent dye. So now you have two samples of RNA. One is labeled with, say, I'll mention it as, for simplification, green fluorescent dye, and another set of RNA which is labeled with red fluorescent dye. So these two RNAs are mixed. Okay, they are mixed, and then now you have a mix of label of a green dye, mix of RNA which is made up of this label of red dye. Okay, and now how this is made is like, for example, the RNA from the first cell population is isolated and they are converted to cDNA using this green tagged nucleotides, and the RNA is removed out and degraded. Now you have a single stranded complementary DNA which is labeled with green dye, and the other set similarly single stranded cDNA which is labeled with red dye. Now you have two population of mRNA which are differently labeled. When you mix them in one vial and do not give the hybridization conditions, they remain single stranded and separate. Now you have a mix of RNA population from one cell and you have a mix of RNA population from the other cell. Now if you want to find out how much of genes are upregulated in one cell population and in two cell population, you do something called as microarray. Microarray is done using microarray chips. So microarray platform, what we call as, this is like your simple slide, glass slide, what you have used in lab for like developing a gram stain. They contain a small platform, and this small platform will have different oligonucleotide which are spotted onto this a small platform. That is, here there will be thousands of oligonucleotide which will be spotted. So once you add the say you the platform I am like enhancing here, it will have different spots, say 1, 2, 3, 4. I have just mentioned there will be 4 spots. Each spot will have like this hole, and they are aligned with different oligonucleotides. Okay, when you this is, say, for example, gene 1, and this is, for example, gene 1, and this is, for example, gene 2. Okay, and now if you mix this RNA containing the green dye, and then you add here, there will be hybridization, and depending on the number of RNA, if the green once there is hybridization, these lights are scanned using laser light which can excite the green dye, and then you can observe how many molecules of the green dyes are bound in each well, and then you record it. Now wash the slides and then add this sorry, not washing, you can excite with a red dye exciting laser beam, and then find out how many spots are showing the red dye, red fluorescence. Okay, I'll repeat it again. Now you have made RNA with a green dye, RNA with a red dye. Why I am telling green and red is, when you excite with a particular wavelength of laser light, only green dye will be excited and show the fluorescence, and you excite with a particular wavelength of laser light, then you have only red dye which will be excited and show the red color that you can record. So in this slide, when you have mixed your RNA in the wells, a particular type of RNAs will be there, and particular type of oligonucleotides which are complementary to the cDNA, which are labeled with different dyes, are present. When they hybridize in the given condition, they are now having, each well will have now the red dye and a certain population of green dyes. So now you keep it in the instrument, you excite it with laser beams which can excite only the green dye, and observe how many of these wells are giving the green excitation, and then you stop the green excitation laser, then you scan the slide with a red laser which can excite the red dyes, and then observe how many of this wells will show red light. Now all these images, when you excite with a green laser beam which can excite this green tag, and how many are excited during the red excitation, are taken as images, and these images are overlaid, and then you get something called a final image, which will show a gradation, because all genes are not of equal intensity, because all genes are expressed at a different levels in the cells. By getting the different excitations overlap, you can see how the gene expression is there in cell population 1 and gene expression is there in cell population 2. So DNA, the microarray has huge applications. How the image looks like will come in further slides which I have mentioned. As of now, we will see applications of microarray. Different microarray applications are there. You can have at a DNA level, where you can just use the microarray to find out how many copy numbers of a gene is present in the DNA, or if you have single nucleotide polymorphism, that can be understood using different probes which are designed with a single base change, and then see hybridization of your DNA of interest and find out single nucleotide polymorphism. At RNA level, microarrays extensively used for studying gene expression, microRNA expression. At the protein level also, this microarrays are used by techniques called as protein array and chip on chip technique. So I'll just give you the glimpse here. Gene expression, what is mentioned, as I told you before, RNA is isolated, they are reverse transcribed into cDNA, and then you have labeled probes with our biotin tagged, and these probes are hybrid, like tagged, and they are mixed with the spotted gene chip, and then you can see the hybridization. Here the picture is very small. Here there is different colors in this small box. That is what is the expression levels, what is given. So you can measure the RNA in order to find the expression changes. Not only mRNA, you can measure this gene expression in terms of ESTs, that is express sequence tag. These are short segments on the mRNA which are like unique for those mRNA, and that express sequence tab can be used. At a time you can screen thousands of mRNAs whether they are present or not. MicroRNA also I mentioned, you can identify using microarray. DNA copy number can be, how many copies are there, can be understood using microarray. a single nucleotide polymorphism can be understood. Chip on chip is a unique technique where suppose you have a genomic DNA. You have in a genomic DNA, you have a section where you have the gene which is expressing. The gene expressing can have exon and introns, but to regulate the gene expression, you have other regulatory elements like promoter, enhancers, that if whether they are there, what kind of proteins are binding there can be understood by chip on chip. For example, you have a protein which you have isolated and you want to see where the protein binds on the genomic DNA. You would have heard about footprinting techniques. What you do in that footprinting technique, you have a protein which will bind to a specific region on the DNA. You allow the binding to happen and then break down all the non-bound DNA, and then you isolate that protein. That is what is told here, like by immunosuppression, where you have antibodies which are developed against this protein, and then that will capture the protein which is bound to DNA of interest, and you can release the DNA from the protein by different chemical methods, and then you can label those. You can identify by sequencing what is the DNA which is given out there, and then use that as probes. And if you have a sequence which are already spotted on the microarray, for example, you know the promoter sequence, you know the enhancer sequence, which will be like spotted on the chip platform, you can do in situ developing of this oligonucleotide, where you have technologies which can add one bases on the each spot and develop this different array of nucleotides. And then this labeled nucleotides what you have, you can seek like find out where it is binding. And if you have certain conditions, now you know this protein binds to this sequence, and then if you have given some cells a stress, and then you like spot that all the nucleotide possibility, and then develop this hybridize this probes with the spots, and you develop the spots, then you have the measurement of the regulatory DNA sequences. This can be used, microarray can be used for DNA fragment that has been bound to specific protein, and that will give an clear image of what kind of promoter regions are there, enhancer, repressor, silencing elements if any, insulators, or a sequence that control the DNA replication. There are some drawbacks, that is expensive for genome wide resolution. You need to have high specific antibodies, and the resolution is between only 30 to 100 base pairs. So proteins array is also there, where you have the spots of proteins, like you can screen thousands of proteins, and you can have a protein binding, a protein interaction, or protein ligand interaction, or protein drug interaction, or protein enzyme and substrate interaction, which can be developed, and these are called as protein arrays, where you have spots of proteins which are there. The drawback here in protein arrays is, suppose like more accurately sensitivity is protein antibody interaction, so you need to have specific antibody for different types of proteins, and there should not be any cross reactivity. So different proteins and different, suppose you have different antibodies also, you need to have modified little binding conditions also. So you need to repeat this arrays with many solution conditions, so that you develop a proper protein array. So in this lecture I have mentioned, we started with what is hybridization. We went in brief into what is the technique of fluorescent in situ hybridization, and then what are the applications of it, and then we came up with blotting techniques like western, northern, and southern blots, followed by what is microarray, the principle of microarray, what is the procedure carried out, and the application of microarray. Thank you, students. If you have any doubt, you can message me or email me. Thank you.